Okay, this is the second video to demonstrate how you can do effective searching with Needuum. The first video was done on an Android. This one's being done on an iPhone. The functionality is all the same. The menus are just in different places because that's the way Apple wants it. So we're back at the start of our hierarchy here, and this time we're going to go into sports. We're going to go into football Canadian or Canadian football, and we're going to do some of the bottom two searches here, the set criteria search and the item criteria search. We covered the browsing and the basic text search in the first video. So the set criteria search basically is going to do the exact same thing as the basic text search, only instead of matching criteria on the words you enter, you use these specific drop downs to indicate here's what I'm looking for, exactly match these criteria. And there's all sorts of different criteria here. There's also some more you can add or you can take them off depending on how you'd like to configure the system. We'll just use the ones that are configured here for now. So if I, for example, wanted to look for novelties and souvenirs as a max category, and I want to look for pennants, I can select those options and hit go. And then we come back again, being sorted by our default sort orders by decade and by issuer. And here's all the pennants. So we found 75 different sets of pennants. So if I can go into the 1950s here, you can see that most of the pennants are assigned to team issue because the names of the manufacturing companies typically weren't provided at that point in time. But in some cases, we can identify who issued them, like, for example, the Shriners pennants that were done for the early All-Star games. So you can see the West and the East pennants there. Oops, I backed out too far, so I'm just going to go back in, and of course our search is retained for us, so I can go back in and execute the same search. If we look in the 1960s for these pennants, again, we can see that there's all sorts of different brands issued. University of Alberta Golden Bears, we've got a couple of pennants listed there for them. And if we go into Saskatchewan, well, that's a towel, so or some sort of commemorative towel from '66 that was issued for the Riders' trip out to their first Grey Cup victory. When we talk about what is actually a macro category here, with the plus sign, it's things that are related, like bobbleheads as well as knotters, pennants as well as towels, and banners, that sort of thing. Stickers and decals and stamps and that sort of thing. So that's a sort of a generic category for these type of things. Okay, we're going to reset this. Now we're going to do a couple of different type of searches based on set criteria. Again, these are returning sets that match these criteria. All of these searches return sets that are matches for whatever criteria is specified. Let's say we want to go into scope, which is defined by whether it's for a league-wide set, like the regular trading card sets, or whether it's team specific. So we're going to go show me just the team specific sets, and I want to see issued for the location Calgary. So that's not necessarily the Calgary Stampeders. It's any team that has memorabilia issued for that location. And in this case, I'm going to say, why don't you just show me the 1930s? And we go in here, do the search. We get back to the 30s, and you can see we've got a couple of issuers, one being this photography studio Hess, which did a bunch of Bronx photography issues, and then one for Halliday, which did a junior Calgary Tigers team from the 30s. So again, it's not necessarily one team. In that case, we're able to specify, just show me everything from that city. I'm going to reset this again. If you want to do by issuer, for example, you could look here and say, well, okay, show me everything that the Pacific Company issued. Those, of course, were more modern, so that's in the 2000s. There's all the Pacific sets there. A couple that we're missing some images from because those are some hard to get one-of-ones. If I wanted to do that same search on a more obscure issuer, these issuers are just the main what we would consider the major issuers. I can say include the minors, and now we've got hundreds and hundreds of issuers here. And if I wanted to look at something like Auto Gear, which is a sticker and bumper sticker company, and if I go for that, now we're going to see, oh, okay, here's the different sticker types of sets that Auto Gear issued. All this stuff, of course, is new in the digital version of the app that wasn't in the previous guide. So there are a ton of things that are new, and similar to what we did in the earlier video. I could, let me reset that. I could say, okay, I'm interested to show me what's in the 1960s and show me what's new. What's new since the last published paper books. And in this case, you can see there are a whole lot. How many did we get there? 107 new sets have been cataloged in this electronic version of the guides since the last publication. And that's a lot of new things that weren't in the original guides. Part of that is because things like coins, things like games, things like stickers and stamps have been cataloged now. If you look in the Decalcomania, of course, there's all sorts of stamps for all the teams in the 60s. This is a way to see what's new since the last books were published. So now we're going to look at the last criteria grouping. This is the item criteria. So this is specifying criteria that matches the items, but we're still returning sets. So it's sets for which those items match the criteria I want to specify. So in this example here, I could say, show me all the BC Lions stuff. And here we have 847 sets returned that have at least one BC Lion item in them. And those items are, of course, sometimes full sets of BC Lions photographs, because, for example, these media photos are just BC Lions. And sometimes, and here's another good example, the Decalcomania, which has this attractive stickers that the Lions had issued. Incidentally, if you're a subscriber, you can scroll through larger format images of these just by tapping any one of these images in the item list. If you're not a subscriber, you can still tap them, but you're only going to get one image at a time. If I back up here, again, there's BC Lions were included in the 58 Topps cards. BC Lions were included in the 59 Topps cards. So these sets match that criteria that was entered, and that's why they were returned. However, if I was to enter this, it's going to retrieve all the items, not just the BC Lion items, because all it did in the initial search was return all the sets that match the criteria, but not the items. So we can also change that. Let's say I'm interested in G. Roy Simon items. So as I start to type a name here, it's going to come up with a list of possible matches, and I'm going to say I want the G. Roy Simon. I selected G. Roy Simon there from the list, so I want all BC Lions sets that contain a G. Roy Simon item. So I go and do that search, and now we can see that he appears in 90 sets that were issued for the BC Lions. And in every one of these sets, these are issuers right here, but in every one of these sets, let's look at the BC Lions ones because there's some specific ones here, there's a G. Roy Simon item. So in this case, it's going to load the G. Roy Simon bobblehead, and that's the only thing in the set because it's a single. If I was to back up and go into Jogo and say, oh, okay, well, show me the 2002, show me the Simon in 2002 Jogo, well, the whole set comes back because I didn't specify the items as well. So the way to avoid that is you go back in here. Of course, we still retain our sets. And you click this button here that says, include the items with the set results. So now, when this executes, it's going to bring back just the items that match the criteria I said. So it still brings back all those same sets, only now only the G. Roy Simon card item has been loaded. by default, because that's what I've asked it to do. I want to see all G. Roy Simon cards, and these are all the ones in here. We don't have all these images loaded yet. We are loading images, as fast as we can. But we're certainly not up to the 2000s and Jogo cards yet for images loaded. So sometimes you'll see the image, sometimes you won't. There's a representative image for each set, of course, but not necessarily every item loaded there. So I'm going to demonstrate this same concept on the hockey side. So if I go over to hockey, let's say I'm a goalie collector. I only collect Toronto Maple Leaf goalies from the 1950s. Well, in order to have that happen, I have to go in here, of course. I have to select Toronto Maple Leafs. And then I say I want goalies. And to say 1950s, I have to go into the set criteria, because that's where that drop down is, and say, okay, I only want 1950s Leaf goalies. And so here, I want the items brought back, and I also want you to combine criteria from both the set and the item criteria matches. That's so that the system will pick up from both of these things here, because I specified some of them here, some of them elsewhere. So now I'm going to say go, and now we have all of the card sets from the 1950s that contains a Toronto goalie, including those cards themselves. In this case, they came back sorted by year, because in the first video, I had changed the default sort order for hockey to by year instead of by decade and by issuer, and those preferences are specific to each sport. So if I go in here, we can see there's the two Toronto goalies that came back in 1951-52 Parkhurst. Again, we're working on loading these issues. They're not all the pictures. They're not all loaded yet. We go into 52. We can see who the Toronto goalies were from 52. We can see who Harry Lumley was 52, 53, and so on. So using this mechanism, you can tailor exactly what your collecting goals are and say, these are only the things I want to see, and the whole system show me all the things that match these things. I can go, for example, I'm going to reset this, and I'm going to I want to demonstrate something. If I was to go in here and say, show me all the Bobby Orr things, the only thing I'm going to get back is sets for which Bobby Orr is part of the title, like his linen calendar and his Bic pens and that sort of thing. I'm not getting back sets that contain a Bobby Orr item, because that's not what that particular search does. Perhaps in the future we might change the way that works, but right now, if I want to find Bobby Orr things, I've got to go into the individual search, say Orr, select Bobby Orr, and then do the search. And now we see that there's 118 different sets where Bobby Orr has at least one item, starting, of course, with his rookie year, although naturally he has some memorabilia prior to this that we haven't loaded yet, but we will eventually load that as well. And then if you go through this material, of course, you'll see that Bobby Orr is involved in virtually every aspect of these collectibles. And in this case, again, I did not say, oh, just load the Bobby Orr items. I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually do that. I'm going to go back here and say, I want you to include those items. I have to reopen this panel so it knows which one I'm acting on, right? Because you can go into any of these panels and start selecting things. It's the one that says active that is going to be the one that sends the criteria to the back end to do the search. If I click this button as well, now these two here are both active. But in this case, I don't want that one clicked on there. So I'm going to go here, make sure that's active, Bobby Orr, bring back the items, go back in here to 71. Go back in here now. We see only the Bobby Orr item is here. This includes, of course, individual Orr items, as well as items where he's part of a group. For example, the box, the panel, the single cards, posters here that are connected in a all-star form, connected 2-to-1. Don't have that picture loaded yet. So these things are available to do much more sophisticated searching, and if you are a collector who collects only, say, just O-Pee-Chee cards, or just goalies, or just rookie cards, or just Maple Leafs, or just Hamilton Tiger Cats or that sort of thing, then hopefully these tools are there and you can work with them to be able to quickly see what things are out there that I maybe not be aware of that I'd like to add to my collection if I collect that type of thing. And one last thing I'll just show one more time before I wrap this up is if I execute this search as a subscriber, I can do a PDF of all this information now at the top search level. If I'm not a subscriber, I can do a PDF, but only set by set. So now if I create this PDF, I'll put it in my downloads. I'll open it. There it is. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go into my files. I'm going to open that PDF. And now you can see I've got 21 pages of all Bobby Orr items from every set, from every year, including all the pricing because I'm a subscriber. And all of that information can be generated, depending on what it is that your collecting interests are, in a few seconds, and then you can spit it out to a PDF, and you got a master list of what things exist and what things you may or may not be interested in adding to your collection. So that's about it for this one. We'll have a couple more videos around identity management and how to subscribe and some of the other features of the system in a bit.